So here we are, the final concepts. I did some color inversing here. So I tried to do the purple and orange and the orange and purple and just trying to test out a few colors. And I'm looking back at the one I just created in the last lesson, and I'm a little afraid of using anything with a gradient and a logo. I mean, you can, but I'm just afraid of being too trendy. So I'm just going to start deleting or moving ones over that I don't think I'm going to use. And I really love the really strong color palette here. So the blue I think is a little too soft for a service company. So I'm just going to slide those away. And I think these are valid. These are fine. Let's put that up here. So now we have some good options, and so now I need to choose which one works, purple over orange or orange over purple. They both look great, and you may have your preferences, but I may do the orange over purple because I think orange is the strongest color, and so I really want the P to take on the strongest color. So that's kind of the final choices. I have a logo that works in a dark background. I have a logo that works on a white background, but there's one more variation missing. These are both vertical in orientation, and I really want to have a horizontal version for the client, as it's great to have two different options for different sizing purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this and go ahead and create a quick horizontal version. And I may need to toggle my grid, so I'm just going to go to View Show Grid and zoom in and kind of line some things up. I want to make sure, but I'm really wanting to make sure these are spaced appropriately. So let's take a rectangle tool and draw up to maybe 3 boxes high. Let's make that a solid color. This is just to help my eye gauge the size or gap I want. So let's do 3. So those are the same, 3 boxes here, 3 boxes here. Maybe I can pull this down, pull it up. Okay, so I want my circle, top of my circle, and this may be too big. The balance may be off here, so that's way too big. Let's try 2 squares high and see how that looks. I'm going to do the bottom of the circle here that goes across. Let me drag this across. And the top of the P maybe can be the top of here. So just making sure my baseline and my top line line up. And so now we need to figure out spacing here. So maybe the spacing between the main logo mark and the typography, maybe I put 1 full square length between those. And you don't have to do all this. This just makes it more polished. It has kind of a rhyme or reason to it. You're not just kind of eyeballing it, but you have some guides to help you. Want similar spacing here in that little gap as here. So I have 1 square spacing between the elements, 2 squares from the top of this to the typography area, and 2 boxes here. Very simple. Let's go ahead and toggle off our grid. Zoom out and see what we think. I think the balance might be a little off. It could work. But let's go back in and fine tune it. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So let's go back to where we had our lines. Let's make it 1.5 squares. Doesn't have to be exactly on the square, but as long as there's consistency. So 1.5 squares, 1.5 squares. I'm going to extend the type out a little more. I could even extend it all the way up to this top red line. What do we think about that? So let's take, I think that's perfect. Go ahead and get rid of that, hide our grid. There we go. I think the balance is a little better. When you zoom out, you can still see the mark. You can still read the text. I might make this, I don't know. What do you think? We'll see. And this is where you can eyeball it. Nothing has to be exact. That was just a guide to help us. Sometimes you got to noodle around with it. Not everything is exact science. Sometimes it's how you feel, but I wanted to show you how to do it that way. Kind of have 2 different options. Great. I think what happened is this P extends outside the circle, so it makes it feel a little heavier on the top, And so that's why I brought this down a little bit. So the spacing between the top of here and the type, and the spacing between the P and the bottom, it's not going to be exact because this makes it a little more top heavy visually. So I just have to kind of adjust it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but yeah, don't ever feel like you're stuck with the grid. It's just a help. It's just a tool. Okay, so there we go. We have a horizontal version. I'm going to whip up a horizontal version that could work on a darker background, and I'll have my final logos, and I'll just do some quick exporting. And you guys probably already know how to export, but I'll just show you the kind of ones that I send out to my clients. And then we're going to finally apply this to a couple of mock-ups to kind of see the validity of this logo, to see how it looks on a van, and show that to the client as an added bonus. So I'm going to show you something that's going to make your life a lot easier when exporting multiple versions of different logo files, is using the artboard system. So I'm just going to go to File, Document Setup, and I'm just going to click on this Edit Artboards. You may already know this, but just kind of reviewing what my process is. So I'm going to create several different artboards. This is the main artboard, so let me go ahead and size that up. And I'm going to leave a little white space on each logo artboard, just so that JPEGs, when I export the JPEGs, they export the white background. So I want to make sure there's enough breathing room when people kind of forces whoever's going to use this to have a little white space around the logo. So I'm going to copy and paste that because I want to have the exact same sizing. So I just went up here to this little new artboard, and it's going to copy and paste the same size. Click OK. Now I'm going to do a new artboard. I'm going to do a different size for a vertical version of the logo. I didn't find out the artboard system until last year, and I would manually create a file. For each variation, I would have a separate Illustrator file, and it was really cumbersome. I would have so many different files on the desktop when I could just have one master file just like this. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And this is what's so great about the artboard system. I want to create a JPEG and a PNG of each version. So this is how easy it is. I'm going to go to File, Export As. Let's do the JPEG version. So I'm just going to click on Use Artboards, and it's going to crop it to the artboards. If you do not select this, it'll mess up. It'll actually show everything on your file. So click Artboards, and we'll do Pikes, and this is going to be, let's do PNG first. Save it to our desktop. Export. Always love to export in 300 ppi. But what I've noticed is sometimes I like to click on Other, and I love to do 900 dpi, just because you can never have too high of PPI. So I always do this in some cases. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, click OK. And let me see if I can pull up my files here. Just like that, I have all 4 variations. I can rename all these. So of course this would be after you get your logo approved from the client. You don't want to do this until you get your logo approved because it'd be a waste of time if they need to tweak it. So there's PNGs, that's transparent backgrounds. We're going to do the same thing for JPEGs. Use artboards and then JPEG. So now I have, and when you do JPEG, I like to do RGB because a JPEG should only be used for digital products. So we want to make sure it's in the RGB space. And sometimes I like to do 150 ppi because you want to keep file sizes smaller on the web. So if this is going to be used just for digital, just for web, file sizes, you really need to get those lower, especially with people with data plans on their phones. You don't want to have these huge files they have to download. So I usually do 150 ppi in RGB for JPEGs. So click OK. That'll probably be the one we put on social media and Facebook. And of course, I'm going to want to have an EPS vector version. So if I save this as an EPS, that's all I got to do. Click OK. You can always, I sometimes save it to a prior version, but I'm just going to use CC for this case, just so if another designer needs to use this file, if they have an older version, they will not be able to open it if I save it in a newer version. So sometimes I'll do CS5 or CS6. It just depends on how the file opens in an older version. But I'll just do CC for now. Just click on OK. So now I have my vector version. I have an EPS. You can also save it as an Illustrator file. That's what I like to have. This is my main editable file. Of course, all the text is outlined on the top. And before you do the EPS, there's one step I missed. Is this text is outlined, but my plumbing is not outlined. You could tell because I could still edit it. So let's select all of the text that is not outlined. That's okay for the PNG and JPEG because those don't need to have the text outline. Create outlines. Now I can go back and save as EPS. Make sure your vector versions, the EPS and the .ai files, make sure you have all your text outlined. It's very important because if it's live text and they don't have the text installed on their computer, it'll show another text. It'll substitute the text, and it's really hard for them to use the file, especially if it's a t-shirt printer. They're always going to request a file to have the text outline. So right-click, outline all of the text. And so there we go. I just exported two a .eps, a .ai file, which are both vector files. I did a round of JPEGs and a round of PNGs so that the client will have a transparent background for their the version with the white background. So there you have it. I have all my files. I can package them up, send them to the client. Of course, this is after I got my approval and thumbs up from the client that they're good to go. Now my next step is to show this on a mock-up, just to kind of help me get an idea of how to extend the brand onto the vans that they're definitely going to be using, and also maybe perhaps some other items.